Yeah. Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I'm excited to be here with you on this Friday afternoon. For me here in Berlin, it's 5 p.m. And Gianni Giacomelli and I are sitting down to talk about what's happening in this new world of work that we're in, catch up on some of the hottest trends on how AI is challenging us to adapt, also helping us adapt. And we're going to be talking today about an article that Johnny wrote 1 year ago as a jump off point for a conversation about what's changed in the last 12 months, what you need to know to prepare for a successful career in 2025 and beyond. And I'm excited to have you here with us. So, to introduce myself, I'm Neil Metzler. I'm a founder and coach, and I work with high performance teams in big tech on topics like career resilience and well being at work. My areas of focus are the future of work, upskill, reskill journeys, career change, and career resilience. And I had the pleasure to meet Johnny at a few AI events here in Berlin. And we had some interesting conversations that I wanted to open the door and share with you. So that's why we're here doing a public session here today. So, Johnny, could you introduce yourself and what you're working on?
Thanks, Neil. I'm very happy to be here on a Friday afternoon in Berlin. Yeah, it's great to have everyone listening in, and I look forward to the questions. These days, I'm a consultant and a researcher. My primary research affiliation is with MIT, with the Center for Collective Intelligence, where, by the way, is housed in Sloan. So it's a business focus. We focus on organizational design and how it changes now that we have increasingly intelligent machines. And we look at collective intelligence, meaning we don't just look at the machine, but we look at how humans in networks of humans and machines in networks of machines together can create what we call superminds. So literally organizational constructs that exhibit stronger collective intelligence capabilities. Yeah. So the consulting work that I do is primarily around organizational process transformation, including the future of jobs of people and skills now that we have machines that we work with, who work with us, and sometimes we work for. And my primary
Yeah.
work today is companies like BCG and Goldman Sachs and others.
That's right. And you have deep connections at MIT as well, which is really nice for me because I studied in Boston. I studied at Tufts University in a political science international relations direction, but there have been some really nice and surprising deep connections here in the community around AI builders, AI thinkers in Berlin, as well as in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So shout out to the Athos organization and Venture Cafe Berlin and Cambridge Innovation Center. So thank you. Awesome. So I'm just going to give us a little bit more real estate here as we can jump into this, Johnny. So I wanted to get into some questions I prepared for you about this article that you wrote. And the topic is human in the loop. So we're going to dive in a little bit to what this means, what we're talking about. The first question I wanted to ask you on this 60-minute stream, and by the way, you can prepare any questions that you have. We'll take any questions towards the end of these. The first question that I have for Johnny and I to discuss is, in your article, you have presented this ongoing shift where AI and AI tools increasingly complement or replace certain roles and tasks at various levels of organizations. And I'm curious, what are the most significant shifts you've observed in terms of supervision, coaching, or leadership changes? And what new competencies are needed for mid career professionals who are trying to thrive through this change instead of getting knocked back? So, what are some of the opportunities and some of the perils maybe for mid career professionals right now?
But that's such a good question. I'm gonna try to answer somewhat concisely, but it's actually a key one. First of all, I would say for now we're talking about tasks more than roles being displaced. But depending on the job that you have, it might actually be roles. Yeah. So if you're a translator, some roles are going right, and so mid-career professionals is interesting because mid-career professionals have they don't have the luxury of retiring soon and basically say, I'm going to pinch my nose and just wait for a couple of years and hopefully I don't get hit. And they don't have the maybe in some cases the agility of somebody just starting working and they have no idea about anything anyway. All of us started back then, you had no idea. And these people are an open canvas. Mid-career professionals, they typically have already some capabilities, domain expertise, etc., that they are banking on, and that makes them, more valuable in the market and more expensive, by the way. And depending on what you do, you need to make sure that those things stay valuable, or you build on those things so that you can continue your progression, and you don't want to be on the wrong side of history in terms of the kind of things that you could do. And for example, look, if you're an illustrator these days, or if you're a musician, you really want to have the ability to work with these things properly. Otherwise, you might end up not being in the right place. Now, the other thing that is important about mid-career professionals is that they can be individual contributors, in which case they become a manager of a machine. Right? Even people who didn't want to become a manager, you become a manager of a machine, and machines are interesting employees. If you're a manager, you become a manager of a manager instead of a manager of an individual contributor. The job of a manager, those of you who have it, is a different one. Yeah? So you need to coach your people how to manage other entities. And then if you're a leader, and this is interesting, we did an interesting panel the other day on leadership in the age of AI. If you're a leader, first of all, you need to really roll with your punches, because you're going to need to impress leadership at an accelerated pace, because there's a disruption happening and organizations need leadership. So you're in for, you're in there right now. It's just you've been called and there's a firefight. But also the organizations that you're going to lead. Some principles don't change. I mean, principles of leadership, how you set incentives, how you set culture, how you set the strategy. Some of those things actually don't change, but the fabric of the work itself will change, and in a way where you're going to have machines that don't behave like machines. So I think in the past, if you had asked, 100 years ago, people introduced the first electrical motors, and then you changed how the shop floor changed. Maybe leadership didn't change all that much, though. You had different type of people, but now you just don't have different type of people. You have different type of people who are influenced very heavily by the behavior of the machines that they're going to interact with, which actually makes these organizations very, in many respects, that you're going to change. I mean, people will get.
Gianni, can you just underscore that? Because I think that's a very interesting technical definition there. Could you just repeat that and break that down for the listener?
You mean the fact that now we have machines that don't behave like machines, or what?
That very last thing you said, that there was sort of like a sequence that you mentioned in terms of organizational management and power and control, where it's like people who are machine assisted managing others who are managing machines. I think this is a really interesting disruption. So could you just take us through those layers just a little bit?
Yeah.
So maybe give a practical example.
Yeah. So absolutely, everybody gets bumped up a notch, right? Since machines now will work for everyone, and that's a different beast. And management practices change. For example, how do you give feedback to a human, and now how do you give feedback to a machine? And people think, I give feedback to a machine because I know how to do it, but it's not exactly right? So we need to prompt properly. We need to have a process of thought that is appropriate. We need to have an engagement level, like you and I have engagement, but we know how to engage with other humans, and humans respond to engagement emotionally, etc. But machines also do. But most people actually don't realize that you reinforce the behavior of machine. Machines tend to be a little subservient, a little sycophantic at times, but you don't want that if you want proper problem solving, if you want innovation, etc. So you really need to be a manager of a machine. Now, if you're a leader, you're going to have organizations where people will listen to you, but they'll also listen to their machines. I mean, increasingly, people will get news and information and knowledge from those machines. Now, assume I've been working. I worked for a CEO for many, many years of a large company where I used to be chief innovation officer. And now the company is almost 200,000 people. If you're a leader of that company, you know that you're almost a sociologist, almost a politician. You need to influence that thing. And that thing is influence, that you have subgroups of people to have subcultures, and you go and find them
Right.
and want to bring them.
Taxonomy of teams and the zoology. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but what happens now, where all these people use these machines, and these machines are going to influence them. I mean, I'm making a stupid example, a stupid analogy. It's actually not that stupid for those of you who have teenage children. Your children before and after TikTok, it's not the same children. Yeah. So, and when you're saying, teenagers, they have what they have in their head, but it's not true, right? I mean, these machines actually will influence us. We already see that adults get a lot more divisive because we have interaction with social media algorithms, etc. Some of these algorithms are not fundamentally different to how some of these machines will engage with you unless they are aligned, etc. So I think leaders need to be aware of that. We need to create, for example, one of the things that is really in bad shape and leaders need to focus on is establishing trust. So if you look at the latest Edelman report, for example, the Edelman publishes a report on trust every year. It's actually a really good read, global. We never had it so bad. People don't trust anything anymore. I'm polarizing this a little bit.
Yeah.
But by country, actually, including places like Germany, where people used to trust society and their politicians.
Yeah. Institutional trust.
So if you're a leader, the first thing you need to do, and one reason for that is that we have access to all this media. You don't know. I mean, literally, you and I today, most people on this call kind of feel, these two are two real people. Give it another 12 months. I'm not sure if people will actually believe de facto that you and I are not avatars. So, for a leader, this is really important. There's a bunch of ways. I don't necessarily want to belabor, but trust is, if there's no trust, there's no collective intelligence, right? And machines can undermine trust. By the way, I work with machines. I'm a technologist, but as a leader, you need to watch that trust level.
Okay. So we talked about trust and changes in authority with machines kind of in the mix at all levels. And you mentioned how you're no longer a person who's just kind of following orders from your superior. You might also be gaining input from machines that are shaping your view of the directives or the move forward plans that you're receiving from leadership, etc. Plus, folks who were ICs or are ICs now need to think about using management skills, people and machine management skills in the way that they do their tasks more effectively. And this is relevant for me in sales. For example, if I'm writing a sensitive follow-up during a negotiation, I'm coaching and nudging the machines that I'm using as sparring partners before I'm hitting send on a high dollar response that can influence a multi-million-dollar negotiation. So how am I building my skills and my competencies of getting better at shaping and crafting that messaging through AI is something I think about a lot for folks in my profession, which is sales. So if we can just draw a line under this, Gianni, what is maybe one recommendation you'd make specifically for mid-career professionals, let's say that might be in line manager on their way up to senior management and are thinking, wow, how do I tackle trust? How do I tackle authority? How do I tackle what you've mentioned?
I would start by the way, your point about sales is really, really super interesting. So there's quite a lot of research that shows that people become a little passive in engaging with these machines. And your point about before I send I press the send button, I really need to force myself to look at this thing again. I need to defamiliarize myself with what I've written. Maybe I let it sit for like 10 minutes and then I come back. Maybe I let it sit for a day and I come back. So the thing that I would always go back to is, in the end, there's, I hate calling it truth, but there are things that are really visibly wrong, factually wrong, right?
Okay.
And so the
In
fact
in every organization, right? We're not saying like the good, the bad. This is just human. This is just we build organizations, so organizations have human flaws as well, right?
yeah, no, this is not a value discussion. This is a competence discussion. If I'm selling uh, a, some cloud architecture infrastructure, there are things that are right for the client. There are pricings that are right. There are covenants in the contracts and the clauses that are right. And the risk is that not just you, if you manage somebody, but the person who actually is an individual contributor who should actually check the T's and C's and all that kind of stuff, they become a little passive. And you need to teach them how you would quality control things with humans and now with machines. So the quality control, and that's the reason why the whole thing about human in the loop is important. Yeah, we think that, well, we can be in the loop. No, because these machines kind of lull us into, or kind of dupe us into feeling that they're kind of on the ball, right? I mean, they're very cogent, they're very persuasive. But it's like having I worked in management consulting for many years. Management consultants can be very persuasive, but there's something wrong, right? So there needs to be a thought process that you push. There's a logical process, but there's also a physical engagement with the subject. It's Friday evening. You want to go home. This thing looks okay. The punctuation, the language looks fine. Maybe I let it go. You want to be hyper critical. I think one of the things, really critical thinking, we need to have that. We need to wear it on our sleeve from now on, because we will be duped into being uncritical, and this is a bottomless pit when you let that happen.
Fantastic, Johnny. So that segues to our next question, and I'm just going to bottom line that, which is, if you're sending an important client email or a message to your boss, even if it's 5 p.m. and you're tired, really understand what you're doing and apply critical thinking, and maybe look at it from a few different perspectives before you actually deploy it and can't take it back.
But Neil, so before you go to the next one, how do you do that, right? Because this is easy. I mean, salespeople are busy, they're under pressure. You need to send this thing. You think you've done your work. How do you do that? How do you? What are your tips for? One thing is look at it harder, but that is a tip. Well, how would you do it? I mean, how do you guide people to do that?
I have one analog solution that is a great go-to, which is read it out loud in my own voice from top to bottom, because it's even if I think I'm doing a great quality control with my eyes, until I speak it out in my voice, I won't realize that it has some weird dip in understandability or some weird dip in tone, and then it reverts to the tone that I want. So typically it helps me find these last mile corrections by reading it out loud in my own voice, and also rechecking it versus the context. So maybe this is email 5, 10, 15 in the thread, and there have been meetings and human moments in between. So really reading it out loud and referring back to the context, it can be done even in 5 minutes. So you have to want to do that, though. Yeah.
It's interesting. You're almost thinking, Daniel Kahneman, thinking fast and slow. You want to force yourself to think slow, right? Because voice is slow, right? And therefore it will slow you down, and your brain will kick in. Am I really making sense? Or, I'm looking at the emails that I had. So this thing actually goes into a lower gear, right? And the lower gear then processes stuff. Very interesting.
Yeah, thank you. And a few folks ask if they can refer back to this live stream after. And yes, you can watch or rewatch this via the LinkedIn event page. It will also be posted to the Cloud Champions YouTube channel. You can search for us on YouTube or view this through the LinkedIn event page if you'd like to rewatch it later. So new models of human AI interaction. Johnny, I think this segues a bit from these type of task performance topics that we were just speaking about. And already a year ago, you were considering these new configurations, humans in the loop and machines in the loop. And I do have a visual I can put on screen here just for a moment to make this more concrete. And machines and humans in the loop. This was really interesting. So it took me a moment to get a little bit oriented here, but what I see Johnny illustrating here is, as we're talking about humans and AI in pieces of workflows. Actually, maybe I'll step back and start with tech augments work, because that's a really helpful starting point. And I apologize if you're on mobile, this is a bit small, but you can see this in Johnny's article, which he published on LinkedIn. Right now, we're at this point between the information technology age and perhaps the AI age, in a sense. And I think the way I read this visual, and tell me if you see it differently, Johnny, is that machines being in the loop is not entirely new. In fact, authors like Shoshana Zuboff talk about how going back into the dawn of the computing age in the 1940s and 50s, we've increasingly been looking at how humans and machines can work together to compute things or to automate certain tasks or workflows. And what you are saying here is we are here now between information tech augments and replaces work, and now Gen AI augments work. What would you, reflecting on this 12 months later, are we still in the same spot, or what stands out to you looking back at this, Johnny?
Well, it's very interesting. Your point about machines haven't been in the loop for some time. Now it's humans who are in the loop, right? Increasingly.
Yeah.
When there's actually a subtle difference. Is very important to understand. So I think we're kind of in the same place, though. These machines have gotten better, so they are gonna be able to do more than what they used to do. But one of the things that we haven't really fully done, we haven't changed the processes all that much to accommodate them. Once we do that, and in some cases, some companies are already doing that, then you'll be able to use machines very much more heavily. I mean, everyone knows the story of electric motors. They were good, but they didn't really change the world until the production process was changed. And we haven't done that for machines that we have today. So we still have machines in the loop, meaning we use machines as a complement to what we do, right? I mean, your co-pilot for doing something, but increasingly, we are going to be on their loop. In their loop, meaning they'll check with us very frequently, or infrequently, which means that we are going to be on the loop, right? So that's two different things.
You already freaked me out, Johnny. Yeah, this is great. Please keep going. You already freaked me out.
But the continuum is interesting, right? I mean, this is not the chart yet, but we used to have machines on the loop, meaning humans will do most of the work, and once in a while, something will transition to a machine, maybe quality control, right?
Oh, yeah.
Then we had machines in the loop of humans. So humans would do most of the work, but they would use tools, right? All the time. Now we have increasingly machines that do most of the work, and the human goes in very frequently, but doesn't do most of the work. Right? So for example, in advertising or in marketing, there's quite a lot of stuff that happens semi-autonomously, right? And the human clicks in and changes stuff. It's increasingly, I think in the deeper future, especially when we have agents that really work properly, we're going to have these things that go out and come back in a while. And we humans will be on the loop for certain tasks. So you see that how this thing moves from machines on the loop to machines in the loop to humans in the loop to humans on the loop. Now, the thing, first, I think we should be freaked out already because of that, and not because it's scary, but because I don't think we are preparing properly. I mean, if, just a conversation you and I are having, many people will find this surprising, but this has started a couple of years ago, right? So we better
For
get
sure.
going. These machines get better. Do humans get better? I'm not quite sure. And certainly they can, but does everybody do? I don't know. Now, the chart that you have here is a little complicated at first, and this is the work that we do at MIT, right? We don't look at things as I have one machine and then I have one human, then they work together. Most of the work, especially in enterprises or organizations, there's many people on a workflow, and there's many machines, and so sometimes machines work by themselves, sometimes the humans work by themselves, there's teams, etc. But most of the design space for process design work, is at the intersection of having many people working on different people, different skills. Say, I don't know, if you're in the sales cycle, you have sales operations people, you have solution architects, you can have pre-sales,
Sure.
you'll have all of that in that workflow. And then you're going to have multiple machines. You're going to have a machine that does knowledge management, that maybe prepares a report for you. You have a machine that controls that your pricing is accurate. You're going to have a machine that controls that your provisions, or the clauses in the contract are the right ones. You're going to have a machine that controls the tone of voice. Right? You have all of the
Yep.
stuff. And we need to design that so that, most people actually think of one human, one machine, or maybe multiple machines and then people in a few punctuations. The reality is that these machines are faster than us. It's going to be really hard for an individual person. I was discussing with somebody on contact centers today.
Yeah.
If you're a manager of a bunch of bots, human manager of a bunch of bots, how do you control them? They go faster than humans. I mean, eventually you need to have a very small span of control, otherwise you cannot control them. The way you'll end up doing it probably is that you're going to parse out all these bots depending on, it's called triaging technically, and it's actually an old
Yeah.
concept that comes from Lean Six Sigma. You're going to parse out what comes out of the bots, and you're going to allocate it to different people depending on the level of complexity. Because if
Right.
it's a simple question, you give it to people who have lower skills. If a difficult question that the machine is resolving, but you want to quality control, then if it's a difficult question, you kick it up to the level of human that is the right one. This is a very simple example. Triaging is a very simple example of having large groups of people who help groups of machines do the job. Because the
Yeah.
one thing that you don't want to do is to send the wrong cases, in technical terms,
Yeah.
to people who are either overqualified or underqualified, and then really we ran out of people really fast.
So Johnny, I've got to draw the line here as we have a few more questions to get to. This is this reminds me of what you just described. Reminds me of my first job at Amazon, where
Mm.
I was in a team that was in the process of being both outshored and automated, and we were working manual cases that had queued for human review.
Mm.
But the real purpose and value of our work was providing examples to machine learning engineers and data scientists of novel cases or edge cases so that the model could better understand how a human had solved, and that these cases could then be labeled and added to training data. So that was a fascinating introduction for me to some of the concepts that you're talking about here. So
Yeah.
yeah, any last words on this one before I take it down?
No, I would say actually that, just build on your point for like 10 seconds. Increasingly, humans are going to work less on the run side of the story, but and more on the design and build side of the story. So humans need to do more of the why and the what work, and machines need to do more of the how. We will continue to do some quality control, but really on the loop, not in the loop, meaning that it's like a statistical analysis and that kind of things. And to your point, your example is very good. We'll need to explain to machines what good looks like.
Yeah.
In increasingly, that is going to be our job, and where most of our time goes.
So we talked here about these new models of human AI interaction emerging, and in your last point, Are you optimistic or pessimistic about that trend, about where our time is going? Is there a real promise that we can realize there of having more satisfaction from work in some of these roles and tasks that used to be a bit monotonous? Or are you more pessimistic at this moment that the disruption or other impacts will be like a net negative? How do you see it, Johnny?
I cannot tell what the net will be. I can certainly tell you that for certain segments of people, this will be really good. At least, as long as we govern and align, don't hurt ourselves. I mean, I see my job already. Right? Your job is similar. Mainly salespeople. They have knowledge workers who do kind of complex problem solving. Boy, I mean, you have better ability to source information, to read stuff fast, to get even machines to critique your work. It doesn't take me all that much time to write stuff. I love it. I mean, if I look at my life a
Yeah.
year ago where I didn't use, a year ago, probably I didn't use Perplexity Pro, for example. I didn't use Gemini Deep Research. I didn't use, obviously, I didn't have O3 Mini from ChatGPT. I didn't have Claude 3.5. It was a lot clunkier. Yeah. So I really like the speed, the frictionlessness, etc. But that's me. A lot of people actually need a little bit of that pace. A lot of people actually are good at crossing the T's and dotting the I's. And for those people, this is going to be a net negative because, there's no. I'm going to give you. I was born in Italy. I mean, I've lived there for a long time. But if you go to, I don't know, if you go to a big church like in Siena, you go to the cathedral. You have the manuscripts of the Bibles from the 1400, and you had people writing the Bible. Beautiful. One person would write a Bible in a year. Now I can actually write, or not the Bible, but some religious manuscript. I can do the same amount of words and probably as beautiful as that thing with a machine in like I don't know, 5 minutes. Yeah, it's not going to look like the guy from the 1400, but hey, and if your job is scribe, now I'm polarizing this thing, but there's a little bit of robot in many people's jobs today. You want to surrender that because you're not a good robot. These are good robots.
That's right. That's right. I remember thinking about studying role for jobs where I could work with languages. So I've always enjoyed language learning. I studied Mandarin Chinese to professional proficiency, German to professional proficiency, and I'm sitting my Italian B1 exam in May. And so naturally I thought, hey, translator, interpreter, these are really great careers that I should land in. But going with a different approach in thinking about a knowledge work aspect, I rather looked at international diplomacy or international business, where I would be deploying those languages in context rather than in task. And I think that has given me more career resilience. So I wanted to come back, Johnny, to the unexpected developments topic. So you mentioned, is it the quality, the speed that you're seeing with certain tools that are in your workflow? What are some other unexpected developments that you think will be particularly relevant for careers and career resilience?
I mean, people haven't noticed, but there's a lot of less hallucination in these things. So, when you look at workflows, 90% accuracy is interesting, but 99% accuracy is where things actually go exponential. So we're actually approximating that thing in many use cases. If you look at Perplexity, it's actually, has been for a year something that simplifies things enormously. And again, some of the tools that we just talked about, like deep research, and now you're going to have OpenAI deep research. So, these things are going to be materially changing. Again, you literally have your intern doing a lot of research for you. That is massive. The other thing I found quite inspiring, to be honest, is that if you prompt them and if you take these machines through a logical thought process, it's not a chain of thoughts, but really a logical thought process, they can help you form your opinions. I think increasingly, and maybe our work at MIT has also kind of consolidated that position in my mind, it's less about them giving you answers, but it's also about them forcing you to confront the questions that they ask you. And together, then you get the right answers, right? And I didn't expect that to be so strong. The third thing that we bumped into, and I think is actually probably one of the biggest realizations that I had in the last 5 years, is that many people are saying, "Oh, these machines are not creative," and actually, I don't know what that means anymore. It's true that if you ask a point blank, new product idea for something complicated, you're going to have some trite answer. But the reality is that you wouldn't do that to a very intelligent human either, right? I'm not sure if even Steve Jobs would actually give you a fantastic answer. But if you take them through a process where you take them through constraints, through intersection between ideas, you filter stuff, boy, you can actually get creativity out of these things. I would say these three things.
Yeah, I've noticed that instead of saying single shot, do this, and then judging that output, I can then add, hey, but I'm actually optimizing here for speed. Can you, and then the version 2 comes out and then saying, I like this, but it really needs to be for customers who care about this particular aspect. Can we optimize for that aspect? So now I'm getting into more of like a 3-shot type workflow where the output then can be a good starting point for me to then sometimes take away, start to manually chisel. And I'm struck, Johnny, you mentioned the beautiful cathedral in Siena and the ways that the great artisans and artists worked later during the Renaissance. They were not working alone, were they? They were working with teams of highly skilled, highly developed artists as part of their team to build things like the Vatican. So in a way, I wonder if the promise and the optimistic take is that, as you mentioned, not only having an intern, but maybe like a team of task specialized interns can help us bring ideas to life, better ideas to life faster and at higher quality, including in creative professions, whether it's fashion, game design, which I understand have a lot of disruption happening right now. So, Johnny, I want to pivot the conversation now to looking forward about workers who, at jobs like me. How can someone like me integrate learning into my daily work? Because the context is, of course, we know things are changing rapidly and we want to have more career resilience. So how could or should we seek to integrate learning into our daily work, our daily tasks?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. And learning is what is going to make a difference for people. I mean, people will be able to learn, will navigate this well, and those who don't do that, they're going to be in trouble. So learning as a skill is something that people should focus on. Right? Learning ability is a skill in itself, and there's quite a lot of literature out there. You can even talk to ChatGPT about it. There's a skill, right? When people think of, I'm going to learn AI. No, learn how to learn first, right? And that's actually the first thing I would actually spend. People have changed job many times. I mean, you're talking about, changing languages, for example. They force neuroplasticity, and I think that's actually a big trait. But learning is a muscle, right? So you need to exercise it every day. So you need to find a way of putting into your routine something that puts you on an edge. Either it's in your job, and maybe you ask your boss or your team to do things they haven't done before. But it can also be outside of your job. And look, you need to find time in your calendar. Maybe a little less social media, a little less TV, and just slide in 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, or whatever, commute time. You can listen to podcasts. And so it's important that you nudge yourself into doing this, right? So I'm sounding very tactical, but the reality is learning never. I used to be a chief learning officer for a large company. You need to interrupt people's flow of life for learning. Otherwise, learning is an off-cycle duty. And off-cycle duties happen when you're done with everything else, which never happens. I mean, you're never done with
Yeah.
everything. So I'd actually be first, work on yourself, on your schedule, etc. In terms of what to learn, I think, you just go and research what kind of skills. Again, we talked about critical thinking, but it's the best is always when you learn something that is useful for you. Now, I don't know if you're Italian, you're learning it because of just love your language, but maybe you're planning a vacation. Maybe you have friends who speak Italian. Maybe your pizzeria down the road, wherever you live, you want to talk to the
Oh,
guy.
Johnny, I didn't mention this before. Oh, I've really, oh my gosh, my family is gonna kill me. So my wife, Francesca, is Italian,
Oh, okay.
from
Well,
Torino, and that's why. So yeah, we've been married for a long time, and yeah, it's
uh-huh.
time for me to get my B1 up there. Yeah.
So I don't know, go marry an AI expert, right? So you can talk to
Yep.
her or him. It's just, I don't know, but then very seriously, humans learn from doing things. Adults, kids, it's different.
Yeah.
Adults, find something in which you can find teachable moments that you can attach to your whatever career. And look, it's actually if you paint, try to paint with AI. If you write, try to write with AI. If you run, try to run with AI, right? I mean, it's just there's so
Mm.
many things that kind of get you into feeling the power of these things. And sometimes it's just about the first step, right? Is the cold start. But that needs to be in the flow of your life. And you need to redirect the flow a little bit to squeeze that in.
Yeah, I love that point. I was trying to create some opportunities for my parents to play with AI and get familiar with it, because the more familiar we are with things, the less like frightening or overwhelming they seem. So my mother has a hobby with our dog Theo, and the hobby's called nose work. So nose work is how dogs learn to track scents and do all of this advanced stuff about it. So I built a custom GPT called Sniffer AI and gave it to my mom on her birthday, and invited her to play around and just kind of created a playground, a sandbox. Sniffer AI is like a trusted advisor for dog owners who are on their path of certifications and nose work. And it's a great, neutral sparring partner for questions that a dog owner might be uncomfortable asking, like, hey, why isn't my dog listening to me better? Or like, am I doing something wrong? AI can take the shame or the concern out of that. And this was just so much fun. My mom told her friends about it, gave it a try, and I was just so happy to find like a doorway to step in with my parents about comfort and familiarity with AI. So I wanted to add one thing about integrating learning, and I really think this topic of upskilling is near and dear to me. I upskilled myself from an e-commerce field to like a cloud computing technology sales field. And I had folks, even trusted mentors of mine, telling me, Neil, whoa, are you sure you can do that? Are you sure you've got the skills to do that? Like, why don't you stick to your lane, man? And I didn't listen to them, or I didn't let that stop me, because I found novel projects where I could use new skills to deliver results that were business relevant, but would force me to learn, would challenge me to learn. And I talk about this in my TEDx talk, which you can find on YouTube if you search my name on YouTube. And I've developed this method so that you can upskill and land in your next big thing faster with less friction and fewer setbacks. So check that out if that is important for you. So, Johnny, bringing it all home here with question 5, and then we're going to have at least 10 minutes of really good Q&A with the audience. If you're still here with us, thank you, and would love you to drop a question in the comments. I can see the LinkedIn questions and comments coming in. So yeah, LinkedIn works great. Go ahead and drop a question in, and I can feature a few on screen here for me and Johnny. But first, Johnny, looking back at what we've learned in the past year, how should someone in the audience think about career resilience? There's so much change going on. How can we get proactive instead of reactive?
First of all, you need to want it, right? I mean, first thing is to realize that there's a need, and I think there's a need, especially for people in the in knowledge professions, right? I mean, knowledge workers. The second thing I would say is don't go alone. Reach out, follow people who are trying to do the same thing, learn about experiences from other people. Collective intelligence is always better than our individual one. And also, people you might have in your circle are great, but just go beyond, right? Just latch on to people who share their experience, because there's a chunk of people who are going through the same thing. Once you've identified a little bit those nodes in the larger network that might help you with that, I think you need your North Star, right? So at the end of the day, you need to know. I mean, some of you may be familiar with the concept of ikigai, right? I mean, this Japanese thing
Yeah.
that basically you need to figure out what you're good at, or what you could be good at, what you like, what you have passion for, what you can be paid for. And you need to do that audit, right? You need to redo it. Because once you have that North Star, you can actually figure out how that intersects with the future of technologies. So, it's really critical that you think of yourself almost like a product, like a service. And how do you market that product and service in the future? What kind of upgrade do you need? But what is your market really? What is it that you're selling? And I think that's
Can
this.
we stay on that point for a moment, Johnny? Yeah, because I hear a lot of concern about developing that kind of mentality about your career. Like, what am I delivering? What kind of products, services have I created that I can offer? Like, what are my offers here? And I think that's something that I've tried on and fits for me. Probably because I've been a solopreneur and I've built offers. In coaching, they say your offers are your gifts to the world. Which the first time I heard that, I was like, okay, man, wow, that's pretty like high language. But over time, you're kind of like, well, what else am I going to do with my energy? And yeah, I do want to create offers. So yeah, could you maybe, what would you say to someone who's maybe a bit skeptical and they're like, nah, man, I'm an artisan, I'm not a marketer?
Um, I would say, first of all, it's possible. I mean, I started my career working as a marketing person in consumer products. I am now doing AI for organizational design. And I've done a ton of different things. Reality is that, it's totally feasible. Obviously, people have their own strengths, right? Some that you can develop. But, the beauty of this is not the first time we had an inflection. There's a lot of literature around that. There's a lot of examples. Most of it is really that you want to do it. And by the way, I am one thing now. I came back to Europe a few years ago, and here workforce is slightly older than what we had in the US. A lot of people say, "Well, I'm too old for this," right? I just want to write it out, and it, I would say we'll just do the math, right? You're going to work until you're 75. Sorry to break the news. Not the way you work today, but in some capacity. So I don't know, if unless you have a few years to go, just you better want it, and you better want it in a way that is pleasurable, right? I mean, I think we should look at this as an opportunity to get ourselves into spaces that are unfamiliar, but ultimately, the opportunity is to do work that is more gratifying, in which you achieve more without doing all the drudgery stuff. I mean, you're talking about Italian Renaissance painter. I mean, most people don't know that Leonardo didn't actually paint a lot of the stuff that you've seen. I mean, he painted, but there's a bunch of people who actually painted bits and pieces, and the little dog in the background wasn't painted by him. And so, look, humans today, you need to do the same thing, right? You can work as teams, you can work machines, you can. It's
Yeah. And maybe Gianni, talking about critical thinking, and we've got I'll turn to audience questions after this. Uh, I come from a liberal arts background where the idea was that, hey, this education, this expensive education, it's helping you learn how to learn and it's developing your critical thinking muscle. But for those of us who are actively in the workforce and are not actively planning to go back and do like a master's in PhD in academia, what are some ways that folks in the workforce can maybe flex or practice or develop critical thinking skills? And I don't have anything top of mind, so if you have something actionable, please, would be
I mean,
really interesting.
the critical thinking is actually one of those topics that there's a lot of learning courses out there. I strongly recommend. Um,
Hmm.
it's interesting. I built on the back of some of the work that we did earlier at MIT and elsewhere. I built something that is called Idea Hardener. You can find it on the
Yeah.
Custom GPT store. Basically, what it does, it takes you through. It takes your ideas, any idea. It can be, I want to write a blog about something, or my product looks like XYZ, and it critiques your idea using about 100 different lenses that have been created by humans, from I don't know Socratic methods to red team, blue team.
Yeah.
There's tools like that that actually show you how to do critique, and when you see it in action, you'll be able to do it. By the way, I think you're talking about mid managers, mid-level people. How did you learn managing? You learn managing because you were managed. And so your manager
Yeah.
showed you how to question where you get the data, this is how you prioritize and all that kind of stuff. You can do the same by being trained by a machine, and then your machines can spar with you. I think you said something before that is important. You don't actually care all that much about looking like a fool in front of a machine, right? You care
For
about
sure.
looking like an idiot in front of a human. So use
Yeah.
machines to just, they don't hurt you, right? Just try it hard and get them to show you that you have logical fallacies, that biases and shortcuts that you do routinely. And then it's a muscle. You just develop it.
That's a great point. Thank you, Johnny. And I will go ahead and share the custom GPT that Johnny mentioned called Idea Hardener. You can search that in the GPT store. It's by Johnny Giacomelli. And we'll definitely link that in the comments on LinkedIn so you can give it a shot. I think, especially for the founders in the audience or folks with an idea, really cool to get in there, challenge, disprove assumptions, do some exploration with an AI before you invest time in user interviews. Maybe getting the right questions to ask in those user interviews can accelerate your product development cycles. So, with just 5 minutes left, really appreciate your time. We've got an interesting tactical and tech question here, Johnny, from Kunal, who follows you on LinkedIn. How do we make people who are not very tech savvy comfortable working with AI agents? So, a couple layers to this one. Where would you like to take this, Johnny?
It's a very good question. Again, back to that human on the loop thing. We have to. First part of the answer, Kunal, is um, let's actually take that as a real problem to solve, not as a nice to have kind of thing. And I would actually always, my first foot forward is always human-centered design. You need to understand the human before you understand the machine. And UI, UX is important. The interaction is important. I mean, even if you look at that idea hardener example that I gave before, it takes you through a progression of increasingly complex things. You need to get people to start. Our brain needs a little bit of time to ramp up. And so you need to actually respect the physiology of the human. And as a technologist, technologists sometimes don't understand actually how. I mean, people do UI somewhat, do actually the good ones, and a bunch of people do, yeah. But you need to understand how the physiology of a human works. Amygdala, just a hormonal discharges from our brain. Sometimes people just back off and say, "Well, this is too overwhelming." And so there's a lot that you can do in the UX There's also a lot that you can do in the data set, so that you serve certain types of results first, so people get used to it. The last thing I would say is, again, do it in the flow of your work. Start with simple things. I mean, I was talking about Gemini Deep Research. It's probably one of the first agents that people will see, and it does research for you. Very easy. You always had the interns doing research. Try things like that, and then get into things that are a little more cumbersome and challenging, etc. Yeah, start with something that is easier.
Yeah, I like that last point there, Johnny, about rethinking the deployment of interns, because if I'm a startup founder and I have a talented, bright, hardworking intern, maybe it changes the way I'm preparing them for the tasks, or the way I'm coaching and guiding and checking their work, because I can give them higher quality training material too, right? Instead of just saying, hey, these are the notes from the top of my head, or here's a few things to watch, I could really consolidate, condense, synthesize as like a preparatory step, and then maybe even sense check that with something like Idea Hardener, so that I'm really equipping interns with higher quality inputs, so I can maybe expect um, not a different level of performance, but a different quality of output, because I've controlled what I can control in the input flow for inputs or junior employees. So I'm so happy. I've got a really nice question here from Fernanda. And Fernanda, I'm going to put the whole question on here, and then I'll take it down so I come back on the screen there. Um, Fernanda is concerned about people being left behind when they don't have access to technology education, especially in regions where knowledge isn't widely shared. I'm from Ecuador and will be visiting in June. And in many rural areas, the real issue is the lack of people who can share and teach advancements. You don't know what you don't know. And Fernanda is going to share what she knows while she is there. But Johnny, how do you think about this rural urban divide and the topics around kind of global south? Yeah, let me just stop there, because there's so many interesting economic layers here and directions this could go. Mm. Oh, yeah, just to rephrase. Oh, do I still have you there, Johnny? Oh, I think we might have lost Johnny. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're back.
no, I'm back now. I'm sorry. So yeah, we're talking. I think I got the gist. I think in general, Global South, I'm buoyant about this in the new wave, because I think some of these technologies act as an equalizer. I mean, if you want to do a business plan for your startup now, and if you're in an underserved or a place that doesn't have a Y Combinator, for example, well, you
Yeah.
actually have some of the basics, and you can talk to these machines, and I think that helps a lot. The rural thing is a beast, right? Because I think unless you have proper connectivity, I mean, not that these things are actually very bandwidth hungry, but they cost some money, etc. So maybe people will pull together, right? Maybe people will do communities where they have these tools in a shared model, and they get themselves, I don't know, satellite connectivity of something. But I see this almost like the old telephone booth in the village. Maybe there used to be only one, and people would actually use that one. And maybe you have this thing that is shared. Sharing is a powerful thing. Yeah?
Okay. Well, I guess that's encouraging then, because I'm hearing you say that while there will be challenges, and Fernanda, I think, calls out the idea that there could be uneven access to kind of acceleration. It is the case that in other ways, certain challenges or persistent challenges, for example, education and teacher productivity in rural areas, that these could actually be ameliorated by some of the productivity gains that we're all hoping to realize. And I just wanted to quickly feature Power in Progress here. So from Darren and Simon and MIT, This has been on a lot of top book lists. I got this for Christmas and have been reading through it. So if you're interested in some of these topics about what's happening to work, economics, global trends, you can definitely take a look at this book and dive into it. So yeah, just wanted to mention that here as we wrap up. So thank you, Johnny. Before we let you go, where can folks find out more about your work and follow you? Anything you'd like to plug or mention?
Yeah, LinkedIn is good. I actually have a bunch of my work there. I do some Substacks as well, but LinkedIn is probably the first point of entry.
Okay, super nice. And what topics do you tackle on the Substacks you're working on? I'm just curious.
Same as LinkedIn. I just that I find that LinkedIn's algorithm for diffusion is not, unfortunately, it's a little bit of an Instagram kind of thing as opposed to knowledge. But hey, it's the best that we have.
And as we just wrap up, thanks so much, Mark Steven Ramos saying, great job, Neil and Johnny. Really appreciate that. We have a couple of additional questions, but we're going to wrap up here. And yeah, please follow Johnny on LinkedIn. You can check out his work as well on Substack, and we'll share the Idea Hardener custom GPT in the comments after the session. So again, Neil Metzler, Johnny Giacomelli here. Johnny, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.